Picture this. You wake up in a beautifully tiled room in a boutique guest house that looks like it was pulled straight out of an ancient Persian fairy tale. The walls are hand-painted in deep cobalt and turquoise. The ceiling is carved wood. Outside your window, a minaret is catching the first light of morning. You stretch, throw on some clothes, walk downstairs, and sit down to a breakfast spread of fresh flatbread, homemade jam, clotted cream, and hot green tea poured by a smiling host who already knows your name. And then you check your daily budget tracker. You have spent $11, and the day has not even started. That is not a fantasy. That is Uzbekistan. And if you have never heard of it, or if it has been sitting on your bucket list for years while you told yourself it was too complicated or too far or too unknown, I am here today to personally drag you there, because this country changed my life, and I think it might change yours too. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Julia, your travel and dating expert, and today we are doing a deep dive into one of the most underrated, undervisited, and absolutely jaw-dropping countries on the planet. We are talking about Uzbekistan, the beating heart of the ancient Silk Road, a place where civilizations collided for thousands of years and left behind some of the most stunning architecture you will ever see in your lifetime. I am going to walk you through exactly how to live like royalty in Uzbekistan on a budget that will genuinely shock you. We are talking food, accommodation, transport, romance, culture, and all those magical little moments in between that you cannot plan for, but that end up being the best parts of any trip. So grab a cup of something warm, settle in, and let us get into it. Part 1. Why Uzbekistan and why now? Before we talk money, before we talk logistics, before we talk about what to eat or where to sleep, I want to talk about why. Because I think the single biggest question mark hanging over Uzbekistan for most Western travelers is simply, why would I go there? And I get it. It is not a place you see splashed across Instagram every other day. It is not the kind of destination that has a Netflix series about it. It does not have a famous beach or a skyline you can recognize from a thumbnail. What it has is something rarer. It has depth. It has a kind of ancient, layered beauty that you can only find in places that have been standing at the crossroads of human civilization for more than 2,000 years. Uzbekistan sits at the very center of the old Silk Road, that legendary network of trade routes that connected China to Rome, carrying silk and spices and ideas and art across the known world. The cities here, Samarkand, Bukhara, Khiva, were not just stops on a trade route. They were some of the most important intellectual and cultural centers in the medieval world. Scholars, poets, astronomers, mathematicians, architects, they all came through here or were born here. And then time moved on. Empires rose and fell, the Soviet Union came and went, and Uzbekistan, tucked away in Central Asia, was essentially hidden from the Western gaze for decades. But that is changing now. Tourism infrastructure has improved dramatically over the last several years. Visas have gotten much easier, direct flights are more accessible, English is more widely spoken, and the Uzbek people, who have always been among the most warm and hospitable on earth, are genuinely excited to show the world what they have been sitting on all this time. So the answer to why Uzbekistan and why now is simple, because it is ready, and because you are running out of time to see it before the rest of the world catches up. Part 2. Your budget breakdown, the real numbers. Now, let me be completely upfront with you here. When I say you can live like a king on $15 a day in Uzbekistan, I mean it. But I also want to be honest about what that looks like and who that applies to. $15 a day is an entirely realistic budget for a solo traveler staying in guest houses, eating local food, using shared transport, and not going wild on souvenirs. If you are a couple traveling together, you can actually do even better per person because you are splitting accommodation costs. If you want a private room in a nicer boutique hotel with a bit more luxury, you might be looking at $20 to $25 a day. And if you want to splurge, and there are moments in Uzbekistan where you absolutely should, a top-tier restaurant meal might set you back $6 or $7. $6 or $7 for the best meal you have had in years. Let us break it down. Accommodation in a decent guest house in any of the major Silk Road cities, Samarkand, Bukhara, Khiva, will typically run you somewhere between $8 and $15 per night for a dorm bed or between $15 and $25 for a private room. And I want to emphasize something here. These are not grim, dingy hostels. These are often beautiful old courtyard homes called havelis, with tile work and wooden columns and gardens where you sit and drink tea in the evening with other travelers from around the world. It is the kind of accommodation that would cost you $150 a night in Marrakech or Istanbul. Food is where Uzbekistan really shines on the budget front. A full sit-down meal at a local chaikhana, that is a traditional tea house, will cost you somewhere between $1 and $3. A bowl of lagman, which is a hearty hand-pulled noodle soup loaded with vegetables and meat, might be $1.50. A full plate of plov, the legendary national dish of Uzbekistan, which we will talk about at length in a moment, will cost you $2 at a local joint and possibly $4 at a nicer restaurant. Fresh bread from a street stall is basically free. Green tea is poured endlessly and costs almost nothing. You can eat magnificently in Uzbekistan on $3 to $5 a day without even trying. Transport between cities is cheap and getting better. High-speed trains now connect Tashkent to Samarkand and Bukhara, and tickets are remarkably affordable. We are talking $5 to $10 for a high-speed rail journey. Taxis and shared minibuses, called marshrutkas, are available everywhere and cost very little. Within cities, you can walk almost everywhere that matters, because the historic centers of these Silk Road cities are compact and pedestrian-friendly. Add it all up, $10 to $15 for a bed, $3 to $5 for food, $1 or $2 for transport. And you are sitting very comfortably at $15 to $20 a day, even with a bit of sightseeing and a coffee or a beer thrown in. Entrance fees to major monuments are typically $1 to $3 each. A guided tour of a major site might run you $5 to $10 if you hire a local guide, which I strongly recommend doing. The math just works. And it works in a way that almost nowhere else on Earth does right now. Part 3. Tashkent, the gateway that surprises everyone. Most people fly into Tashkent, Uzbekistan's capital, and treat it as nothing more than a stopover on the way to the Silk Road cities further south. That is a mistake. Give Tashkent at least 2 days, because this city has a personality all its own, and it will genuinely surprise you. Tashkent is a strange and wonderful hybrid. It was largely rebuilt after a devastating earthquake in 1966 by Soviet urban planners, which means it has these enormous Soviet-era boulevards and monumental public squares that feel almost surreal. But layered over and between all of that Soviet infrastructure is a very alive, very modern, and increasingly stylish Central Asian city that is finding its own identity in real time. Start your morning in Tashkent at the Chorsu Bazaar. This is one of the great markets of Central Asia, and walking through it first thing in the morning when the light is golden and the stallholders are arranging their goods is one of those travel experiences that just burns itself into your memory. The bazaar is centered around a massive blue dome that looks like something out of a fairy tale, and inside and around it you will find everything. Dried fruits and nuts in colors you did not know existed, pyramids of spices, fresh vegetables, live chickens, handmade textiles, and every conceivable kind of bread. The bread alone deserves a paragraph. Uzbek bread, called naan, is a round, slightly flat loaf stamped in the center with a beautiful decorative pattern before baking. It comes out of clay ovens called tandir, golden and fragrant, and it is one of those foods that is so simple and so good that you find yourself buying another loaf every time you pass a bakery, which in Tashkent is roughly every 50 meters. From Chorsu Bazaar, wander through the Old City, the Kastimam district, where you will find the city's oldest mosques and madrasas, including the Kastimam complex, which houses one of the oldest Qurans in existence. The atmosphere here is quietly spiritual and completely unhurried. Old men sit in the shade playing chess or backgammon. Children run between the columns. Women in bright traditional dress move between the market stalls. It feels like a different world from the Soviet boulevards just a few blocks away. For lunch, find a local plov center. Tashkent has several famous plov restaurants that are essentially pilgrimage sites for Uzbeks themselves. Great cauldrons of plav cooked over open fires, served by the kilo with pickled vegetables and onion salad. This is a meal that costs $2 and that you will be thinking about for years. In the evenings, Tashkent has a surprisingly lively scene. There are rooftop bars, wine bars serving Uzbek wine. Yes, Uzbekistan makes wine, and it is better than you expect. Craft beer places, and restaurants ranging from Georgian to Korean to Italian. The Mirabad and Yunusabad districts have a modern energy that feels genuinely cosmopolitan. Young Uzbeks are educated, curious, and often speak excellent English. If you are a solo traveler and you are open to meeting people, Tashkent will not disappoint you. And here is a little note from me as your dating expert. Uzbekistan is a country where hospitality and connection are deeply embedded in the culture. People here genuinely want to talk to you, invite you for tea, show you their city. Do not mistake this warmth for flirtation. It is hospitality, and it is profound and real. But it also means that as a traveler, you will feel welcomed in a way that is increasingly rare in a world of transactional tourism. You will feel seen and invited in. And that feeling, my friends, is worth more than any five-star hotel. Part 4. The train to Samarkand. And why the journey matters at some point during your stay in Tashkent, probably on day 2 or 3, you will board a high-speed train heading southwest, and you will watch the city give way to the Uzbek steppe, vast, flat, golden, and about 2 hours later, you will pull into Samarkand. And your life will not be quite the same again. I am not being dramatic. I have been to a lot of places. I have stood at the edge of the Grand Canyon and watched the sun set over Santorini and walked through the temples of Kyoto at dawn. And Samarkand is in that company. It is one of the most beautiful places human beings have ever built. The train journey itself is an experience worth savoring. The Afrosiab high-speed train is clean and comfortable and fast, and it costs somewhere around $10 to $12 for a standard seat, though you can find deals for less if you book in advance through the official Uzbekistan Railways website. Get a window seat. Watch Uzbekistan unfold outside the glass. It has a beautiful, melancholy emptiness. The kind of landscape that makes you feel very small and very alive at the same time. Part 5. Samarkand, the center of the world. If you have ever seen a photograph of the Registan, that great square at the heart of Samarkand framed by 3 towering turquoise-domed madrasas, and felt a pull in your chest, felt something in you saying, I need to go there, then know that the real thing is even better than the photograph. Every photograph, every painting, every description. The Registan is one of those places that makes your brain struggle to process what it is actually seeing. The scale of it, the color of it, the detail of it, every centimeter of every facade covered in intricate geometric tile work in shades of cobalt and gold and turquoise and white that have been there for 600 years and still glow like they were laid yesterday. Stand in the center of the square and turn slowly and try to take it all in, and you will probably just laugh, because there is nothing else to do. The best time to visit is either very early in the morning, just after sunrise when the light hits the tiles and the square is quiet, or in the evening when it is illuminated for the night show. The midday sun is beautiful too, but the heat can be intense in summer and the tour groups are at their thickest. Entry costs about $2 or $3. A local guide for a couple of hours will cost you $10 to $15 and will be worth every cent, because the history embedded in every tile of the Registan is extraordinary and almost impossible to absorb without someone translating the centuries for you. After the Registan, walk to the Shah-e-Zinda necropolis. This is where Samarkand hides its most intimate, most heartbreaking beauty. Shah-e-Zinda is an avenue of mausoleums climbing up a hillside, each one dedicated to a nobleman or noblewoman of the Timurid court. The tile work here is more intricate, more colorful, more varied than almost anywhere else in Central Asia. Deep lapis lazuli blues, warm terracotta, glittering gold, peacock greens. Walking up through Shah-e-Zinda feels like walking through a jewel box. Locals come here to pray and to be close to the spirits of the buried, and there is an emotional charge to the place that is hard to describe and impossible to shake. Walk also to the Bibi Kanyam Mosque, which was once the largest mosque in the Islamic world and which Timur, the great conqueror also known as Tamerlane, built as a monument to his wife. The mosque is partially ruined, which somehow makes it more beautiful. The scale of what remains is almost incomprehensible. Doorways 10 stories tall, domes that float against the sky, fragments of tilework that give you a glimpse of what the whole must have looked like at its height. In the evenings in Samarkand, eat at one of the restaurants along Tashkent Street or near the Registan. Shashlik, skewers of marinated lamb grilled over charcoal, is spectacular here. Order a whole plate of them with lapioshka bread and a bowl of fresh salad and a cup of tea and sit outside in the warm evening air and look up at the dome of a 500-year-old mosque glowing against the darkening sky and tell me you are not living like a king. You cannot, because you are. Budget-wise, you can spend a full and rich day in Samarkand, meals, entrance fees, a guided tour, for somewhere between $8 and $12. Accommodation in a lovely guest house in the old city, often in a restored traditional courtyard home, will run you $15 to $20 for a private room. There are also excellent hostels with dorm beds for $8 to $10. You are doing beautifully. Part 6. The Road to Bukhara. Silk road towns in between. From Samarkand, many travelers head directly to Bukhara, and there is a train that will take you there in a couple of hours for about $5 to $8. But if you have a flexible schedule and a sense of adventure, consider making a stop along the way. The town of Shakrisabz, about an hour south of Samarkand by shared taxi or bus, is where Timur was actually born. There is a partially reconstructed palace complex, called Aksaray here, the White Palace, that gives you a sense of the sheer ambition of Timurid architecture. The town itself is quiet and off the tourist trail, which means locals will stop and stare and smile and probably invite you for tea within the first 15 minutes of wandering around. This happens in Uzbekistan. It is not weird. Embrace it entirely. If you have time and a stronger sense of adventure, the Nuratau Mountains north of Bukhara offer a completely different side of Uzbekistan. Small villages, traditional farms, walnut trees, and a community-based tourism network that lets you stay with local families for genuinely almost nothing. This is real rural Central Asia, untouched by the tourist trail, and it is absolutely extraordinary. Part 7. Bukhara, the Holy City. If Samarkand is the showstopper, the dramatic architectural marvel that leaves you speechless, then Bukhara is the one that breaks your heart a little. In the best possible way. Bukhara is older than Samarkand. It has been continuously inhabited for at least 2,500 years. It was one of the greatest centers of Islamic learning in the medieval world. Scholars and poets and mystics walked these streets when Europe was still in the Dark Ages. And unlike Samarkand, which has been partially modernized and expanded, the historic center of Bukhara, the old city, has been remarkably preserved. Walk through it, and you feel the weight of centuries in a way that is almost physical. The geographic and spiritual heart of Bukhara is the Liab-e-Hauz complex, a large pool surrounded by mulberry trees and old buildings, including the Nadir Divan Begi Madrasa and Khanaka. In the evenings, locals and travelers gather here to sit by the water and drink tea and eat and watch the light fade. There is a bronze statue of the legendary Nasreddin Hoja, the wise fool of Islamic folklore, riding his donkey, and children climb on it and tourists photograph it, and old men sit nearby on traditional wooden beds called tak drinking tea and playing dominoes, and the whole scene has a timeless, unhurried quality that is almost overwhelmingly lovely. The Ark Fortress, Bukhara's ancient citadel, rises at the edge of the old city like something from a history of battles and intrigues, which it absolutely is. Emirs lived here. Prisoners were kept in its notorious bug pit. The last emir of Bukhara fled from here in 1920 as the Red Army approached. Walking through the Ark is a walk through the layered violence and beauty of Central Asian history. The Kalan minaret, which is 700 years older than the Registan, stands at the center of the old city and has looked out over Bukhara through everything. Genghis Khan reportedly spared it when he destroyed the rest of the city in the 13th century, because he had to tip his head back to look at the top of it, and in doing so his hat fell off, which he took as a sign to leave the minaret standing. Whether that story is true or legend, I cannot tell you, but I choose to believe it. Bukhara also has the most charming carpet and textile workshops of any city in Uzbekistan. You can watch artisans creating traditional ikat fabric, that gorgeous resist-dyed silk textile in vibrant, wavy patterns in small workshops tucked around the old bazaar domes. These domed trading bazaars, called tims, have been on this spot continuously since the 16th century. The silk scarves and ikat fabrics you can buy here are genuinely beautiful and genuinely affordable. A silk scarf might cost you $5 to $10, and a piece of ikat fabric might cost $15 to $20. These are real handmade traditional textiles, not mass-produced knockoffs. They are the real deal. For food in Bukhara, do not miss the local specialty called Bukharan plav, which is slightly different from the Tashkent or Samarkand versions. Sweeter, often cooked with raisins and carrots and chickpeas, and spectacularly good. There are also small restaurants around the Layabai house that serve excellent sherpa, a slow-cooked meat and vegetable soup, and samsa, which are baked pastries filled with lamb and onion that come out of the tandoor oven burning hot and absolutely perfect. A note on tea in Uzbekistan because it deserves its own moment. Tea here is not just a drink. It is a ritual, a social institution, an act of hospitality. You will be offered tea constantly, in guest houses, in shops, by strangers in the street. Always accept it. Sit down and drink it, and let the conversation happen. This is how you actually meet Uzbekistan. Not through monuments, though those are extraordinary. Through tea and the people sitting across from you. Budget in Bukhara, very similar to Samarkand. You can stay in a beautiful guest house for $12 to $20 a night, eat very well for $3 to $5 a day, and see the main sites for $2 to $4 in entrance fees. A full and rich day in Bukhara costs you $10 to $15. A week in this city, properly immersed, will cost you what a single dinner in Paris costs. Part 8. Khiva. The city frozen in time. From Bukhara, the next and in some ways most astonishing stop on the Uzbek Silk Road is Khiva, deep in the Khwarezm region near the Turkmenistan border. Getting there is an adventure in itself. You can fly from Bukhara or Tashkent for about $20, or take an overnight train that costs about $8 to $12 and deposits you at the edge of the desert at dawn. Khiva is unlike any other city in Uzbekistan. Where Samarkand is grandiose and Bukhara is layered and complex, Khiva is completely, utterly frozen. The inner city, the Ichan Kala, is a walled fortress city that has been preserved so completely that walking through it feels genuinely like stepping back several hundred years. There are no cars inside the walls, no modern buildings, no glass and steel, just the same mud brick walls and carved wooden columns and turquoise domes and narrow alleys that have been here since the 17th and 18th centuries. The Ichan Kala is small enough to walk across in 10 minutes, but you will spend hours in it, because every corner reveals something new. The Islam Khoja minaret, which is the tallest in Uzbekistan, rises above the inner city in stripes of blue and white tile. The Juma Mosque has 212 carved wooden columns, each one unique, some of them centuries old. The Khalta minor minaret, which was meant to be the tallest minaret in the world, but was never completed because its patron died, sits squat and enormous and covered in turquoise tiles that are almost blindingly beautiful in the afternoon sun. Khiva feels like the end of the world and the center of the world simultaneously. Because for the caravans that crossed the Karakum Desert, it was exactly that. The last city before the desert swallowed you, or the first city that emerged from the sand after weeks of nothing. There is a loneliness and a magic to Khiva that is different from anywhere else. Stay inside the Ichan Kala if you can. There are several small guest houses within the walls, some of them set in beautiful old traditional houses with courtyard gardens. Prices are very reasonable, $10 to $20 a night for a private room. Watch the sunset from the city walls. Watch the stars after, because Khiva has very little light pollution, and the sky out here in the desert is absolutely spectacular. Eat in Khiva at one of the small restaurants or chaikhanas in the inner city. The food is honest and good and cheap. This is not a gourmet destination. It is a place where you eat simple, hearty Central Asian food and feel completely satisfied. Shashlik and bread and tea, plav on weekend mornings, samsa from a corner stall, $2 to $3 for a full meal every time. Khiva is where Uzbekistan's magic is most concentrated, most undiluted. It is where you feel most vividly the sense of standing at a place where the ancient world still breathes. Do not skip it because it feels far. It is worth every minute of the journey. Part 9. The Food of Uzbekistan. A love story. I want to take a proper moment here to talk about Uzbek food in depth, because it deserves it. It is one of the great undiscovered cuisines of the world, and I am completely in love with it. Let us start with plav, because plav is not just Uzbekistan's national dish. It is the soul of the culture. Plav is a rice dish cooked in a massive cast-iron cauldron called a kazan over an open fire, with lamb or beef, carrots, onions, garlic, and spices, including cumin and barberry. The technique is everything. The fat renders out of the meat and coats the rice, and the whole thing cooks slowly until the bottom layer of rice crisps up into a golden crust that is the most coveted part of the dish. Good plav is rich and fragrant and deeply satisfying in a way that is almost medicinal. Bad plav is still pretty good. Every region of Uzbekistan has its own version of plav. Tashkent plav is made with yellow carrots and tends to be richer and more heavily spiced. Samarkand plav layers the ingredients differently, with the rice and carrots and meat often cooked in separate stages and then combined. Bukharan plav is sweeter, with dried fruit. Fergana plav from the Fergana Valley in the east is considered by many Uzbeks to be the best. Rich, fatty, intensely flavored. If you are lucky enough to eat in someone's home in Uzbekistan, plav will almost certainly be on the table because plav is what you cook for guests. It is the dish of celebration, of welcome, of honor. Then there is lagman, those hand-pulled noodles in a spiced broth with vegetables and meat that I mentioned earlier. This dish has Chinese ancestry, brought along the Silk Road, and you can taste the journey in it. The noodles are thick and chewy, and the broth is bright and warming, and a bowl of lagman on a cold Central Asian morning is one of the great comfort foods in the world. Samsa deserve their moment. These are triangular pastries baked in a tandoor oven, filled with lamb and onion and sometimes pumpkin or potato, with thin, slightly flaky pastry that shatters when you bite into it. They are the snack food of Uzbekistan, sold from bakeries and market stalls everywhere, and they cost almost nothing and are absolutely addictive. Shashlik is skewered and grilled meat, lamb, beef, chicken, sometimes liver, marinated with cumin and onion and cooked over charcoal until slightly charred on the outside and juicy within. This is street food and restaurant food and celebratory food all at once, and it is spectacular. The salads and sides deserve mention too. Achichuk is a simple salad of thinly sliced tomatoes and onions with a drizzle of oil and a pinch of cumin, and it is the perfect counterpoint to all the rich, meaty main dishes. Manti, steamed dumplings filled with lamb, are eaten for breakfast or as a snack. Dimlama is a slow-cooked stew of meat and vegetables that fills the kitchen with an incredible smell for hours. And then there is the bread. Naan. Every meal comes with it. It is torn and shared. It is offered as a gesture of welcome. When guests arrive at a home in Uzbekistan, bread is often placed in front of them before anything else. There is a saying that if you have bread, you have everything. In Uzbekistan, you understand exactly what that means. On the budget side, eating in Uzbekistan is almost surreally affordable. Street food snacks cost 20 to 50 cents. A full restaurant meal is $2 to $4. Even at the nicer tourist-facing restaurants in Samarkand or Bukhara, the ones with tablecloths and menus in English, a full meal with drinks will cost you $5 to $7. You will never, ever spend more than that on a meal in Uzbekistan unless you are actively trying to. Part 10. The people. The real reason to go. I have talked about architecture and food and budget numbers and transport, and all of that is real and important. But I want to spend some time on what I think is ultimately the most important thing about Uzbekistan, and that is the people. The Uzbek people are among the most hospitable, warm, and curious human beings I have ever encountered in my travels. The concept of hospitality here, memon it is called, is not just a social custom. It is a deeply held value, something almost sacred, the idea that a guest in your home or your city or your country must be treated with absolute generosity and care. You will feel this from the moment you arrive. Your guest house host will wake up early to make sure your breakfast is hot when you come downstairs. The shopkeeper will wave you into the back room for tea even though you only came in to buy a postcard. The family at the next table in the chaikana will notice you looking lost and will physically get up and walk you to where you are trying to go. An old man in the park will beckon you over and slowly, with great seriousness, share with you the best route through the city, drawing a map with a stick in the dust. A child will practice their 3 words of English on you, and you will clap, and they will run away laughing. This is Uzbekistan. This is the country you are traveling to. Not just the blue domes and the ancient bazaars, though those are extraordinary. The people, the texture of daily life, the warmth and the curiosity and the genuine delight at your presence. As someone who thinks and writes and talks about human connection, about the way travel and romance and openness to the world intersect, I want to say that Uzbekistan does something particular to the traveler. It slows you down. It sits you down with a cup of tea. It asks you to be present in a way that is almost impossible to maintain in your normal life. And in that slowing down and sitting down, you find yourself more open to conversation, to connection, to possibility. I have met people in Uzbekistan who have become genuine, lasting friends. I have had conversations over a $2 bowl of plov that have stayed with me for years. I have felt, in the narrow streets of the old cities and in the vast silence of the steppe, a particular kind of freedom and aliveness that is the reason I travel in the first place. And yes, since I am the dating expert on this channel and I know some of you are traveling solo and thinking about it, Uzbekistan is an absolutely wonderful place to meet people. Not in a superficial nightclub kind of way, but in the deepest possible sense. You meet people through shared wonder. You bond over the collective astonishment of standing in front of something impossibly beautiful. You connect through the universal language of a meal shared and a cup of tea passed across a table. Uzbekistan creates the conditions for real human connection constantly, almost effortlessly. All you have to do is show up and say yes. Part 11. Practical things, visas, safety, and getting around. Let me give you the practical rundown, because I know some of you are already reaching for your passports, and I want to make sure you actually get on the plane successfully. Visas for Uzbekistan have gotten dramatically easier in recent years. Citizens of many countries, including most European nations, the United Kingdom, the United States, Japan, and many others, can now enter Uzbekistan visa-free for up to 30 days. Some nationalities can get an e-visa online before they travel, which is a straightforward application process that takes a few days and costs about $20. Check the current policy for your specific passport before you travel, as these things do change, but the overall direction has been strongly toward opening up. The local currency is the Uzbek som, and while the exchange rate changes, at the time of this filming, you get a very favorable rate as a traveler with dollars or euros. Cash is king in Uzbekistan. While ATMs exist in major cities and some hotels and restaurants accept cards, most local establishments and markets and transport are cash only. Bring some dollars or euros to exchange when you arrive. The official exchange is now the same as the black market rate. The government unified them a few years ago. So there is no reason to change money anywhere other than official exchange offices and banks. Safety is, I think, the other thing people worry about, and I want to address it directly. Uzbekistan is extremely safe for tourists. Crime against tourists is very rare. The country has a strong police presence in tourist areas, and locals are protective of visitors in that hospitality-minded way we talked about earlier. Petty theft happens, as it does everywhere, so take basic precautions with your belongings in markets and crowded places. But you do not need to worry in the way you might in some other parts of the world. Women traveling solo report feeling very safe in Uzbekistan, more so than in many European or South American destinations. Use your normal travel common sense, and you will be absolutely fine. Health-wise, the main things to watch are food and water. Drink bottled water. Be a little careful with raw vegetables that may have been washed in tap water, especially in smaller towns. The food from restaurants and established market stalls is generally fine. Uzbek cuisine is mostly cooked, which helps. Bring your standard traveler's pharmacy, antihistamines, stomach medication, pain relief, any prescriptions you need. Pharmacies exist in all major cities and are well stocked. Getting around between cities is primarily by train or shared taxi. The high-speed rail between Tashkent, Samarkand, and Bukhara is excellent and bookable online. Khiva is best reached by plane from Tashkent or Bukhara. There are several flights a day, and they are very cheap. Within cities, walk whenever you can, because the best things are always the things you find on foot. For longer distances within a city or for day trips, taxis are cheap and negotiable. Agree on a price before you get in, or use the Yandex Taxi app, which works in Uzbekistan and gives you a fixed price. Part 12. Seasonal Considerations. When to go. Uzbekistan has a continental climate with hot summers and cold winters, and when you go matters quite a lot. The absolute best times to visit are spring, April and May, and autumn, September and October. In spring, the weather is mild and warm, the light is golden and soft, and the countryside is green and blooming. In autumn, the temperatures are perfect. The sky is a deep, intense blue that makes the tilework of the monuments glow, and the bazaars are full of late-season melons and grapes and pomegranates. Both of these seasons are when Uzbekistan is at its most photogenic and most comfortable. Summer, June through August, is hot. Very hot. Temperatures in Bukhara and Khiva regularly exceed 40 degrees Celsius, which is 104 Fahrenheit. It is absolutely possible to visit in summer. Thousands of people do, but you need to structure your days around the heat, sightseeing early in the morning and late in the afternoon, and retreating to shade and cold drinks in the middle of the day. The advantage of summer travel is that it is slightly cheaper and slightly less crowded than the peak shoulder seasons. Winter, December through February, is cold, sometimes very cold, but Uzbekistan in winter has its own magic. The monuments are quiet and often dusted with snow. The tea houses are warm and full. The light is beautiful. Prices drop. And there is something extraordinary about seeing the blue domes of Samarkand reflected in frost. If you can handle the cold, winter travel in Uzbekistan is wonderful in a very particular way. Part 13. Hidden Gems, Beyond the Silk Road Cities. Most people who go to Uzbekistan see Tashkent, Samarkand, Bukhara, and Khiva. And those 4 cities alone are worth the trip 100 times over. But if you have more time or a more adventurous spirit, there is so much more. The Fergana Valley in eastern Uzbekistan is a fertile, densely populated region that was historically one of the most important parts of the Silk Road. The city of Rishton is famous for its blue-glazed ceramics, a craft that has been practiced here for centuries and that produces some of the most beautiful pottery in Central Asia. You can visit workshops and watch masters at work and buy pieces directly from the artists. The nearby town of Margilan is the silk capital of Uzbekistan. There is a factory here where you can watch traditional ikat silk being woven on hand looms in patterns that have not changed in generations. The Nuratau Kizilkum Biosphere Reserve offers ecotourism in a mountain ecosystem that most travelers never see. Community-based tourism here lets you stay with local families, hike in the mountains, see ancient petroglyphs, and get a completely different sense of what Uzbekistan is. This is not the Uzbekistan of Timurid architecture and Silk Road bazaars. This is the Uzbekistan of shepherds and walnut trees and mountain streams and ancient rock carvings of animals and hunters left by people who lived here thousands of years before Timur was born. The Aral Sea, or what remains of it, is one of the most haunting and important sites in all of Central Asia. Once the 4th largest lake in the world, it has been drained over the past several decades by Soviet-era irrigation projects, leaving behind a vast salt desert and the rusting hulks of ships stranded far from any water. Visiting the Aral Sea is not exactly a vacation activity. It is a confrontation with one of the great environmental catastrophes in human history. But it is profound and important and unforgettable, and the nearby city of Moynak, which was once a thriving fishing port, is one of the most eerily beautiful and melancholy places I have ever been. Part 14. A Day in the Life. What your perfect day looks like. I want to paint you a picture. A specific day. Your perfect day in Uzbekistan. You wake up at 6:30 in a guest house in Bukhara. Your room is decorated with traditional fabrics and tile work. The window looks out onto a courtyard where a mulberry tree is catching the early light. You can smell tea already brewing downstairs. You eat breakfast in the courtyard, hot naan bread, fresh from the bakery around the corner, with local honey and kaymak, which is thick clotted cream, and a boiled egg and sliced tomatoes and cucumber, and a glass of green tea, and then another. Your host comes to sit with you for a moment and asks about your plans and tells you to visit such and such a spot that the tourists miss, and you write it down. You walk out into the old city at 7:30 when the alleys are cool and golden and almost empty. You find the spot your host recommended, a tiny courtyard with a 15th century portal, the tile work still largely intact, nobody there but a cat sleeping in a patch of sunlight. You sit for a while. You take a few photographs, but mostly you just look. You wander to the Liabi house by 8:30. Old men are sitting on the takht drinking tea. Children are chasing pigeons. The reflection of the madrasa shimmers in the pool. You order a cup of tea from a stall and sit and watch the morning happen. By 10, you are at the Ark Fortress, one of the first visitors of the day. You walk through the old throne room and the courtyard where prisoners were once paraded, and the tower where you can look out over the entire city and see the minaret and the bazaar domes and the flat rooftops and the desert beginning on the horizon. Lunch is samsa from a stall near the old bazaar domes, 2 of them, piping hot, 1 samoni each. That is about 20 cents apiece. You eat them standing up. The afternoon is for getting lost. You do not have a plan. You walk into alleys that lead to other alleys. You hear a sound, hammering, and follow it to a coppersmith in a tiny workshop who looks up and smiles and beckons you in. You watch him work for 20 minutes. He shows you a tray he is making. You buy a small copper cup for $1.50. You will use it for the rest of your life. At 4 o'clock, you climb to the top of the city walls and watch the desert turn gold and pink in the late afternoon light. A young Uzbek guy sits nearby and asks where you are from, and within 5 minutes you are both laughing about something neither of you can quite explain, and he is showing you photographs of his family on his phone and asking if you have ever heard of the Uzbek singer he loves. Dinner is shashlik at a restaurant near the Kalon Mosque, a full plate of lamb skewers, fresh bread, akachuk salad, a cold beer. $5 total. You sit outside. The minaret glows against the darkening sky. Somewhere nearby, someone is playing the dutar, a 2-stringed lute, and the sound floats over the rooftops. You walk back to your guest house as the call to prayer echoes through the old city. You sit for a moment in the courtyard under the mulberry tree. You think, I have spent $14 today. I have had the best day in years. That is Uzbekistan. Part 15. Connecting it all. The Silk Road Experience. Here is the thing about traveling Uzbekistan that I think is easy to miss if you approach it just as a checklist of monuments and cities to tick off. The whole point of the Silk Road, the reason it existed, and the reason it produced such extraordinary art and architecture and culture, was connection. The movement of things and ideas and people between distant worlds. The collision and synthesis of the Chinese and the Persian and the Arab and the Mongol and the Turkic and the Greek. When you travel through Uzbekistan, you are walking through the physical residue of that collision. Every piece of tile work is a synthesis of multiple traditions. Every dish on your plate is the result of centuries of borrowed and adapted flavors. The faces of the people around you carry the genetics of 100 migrations and conquests and intermarriages. The language mixes Turkic and Persian and Russian and Arabic. The music uses instruments and modes from a dozen different traditions. Uzbekistan teaches you, more powerfully than almost anywhere else I have been, that the best things in human culture come from exchange. From opening your doors and your kitchens and your cities to the stranger passing through. From saying, you are welcome here, sit down, have some tea, let us see what we can learn from each other. As a traveler, you are part of that tradition. You are the latest in an unbroken line of people who have come through these cities carrying news from elsewhere, bringing new ideas, taking back new flavors and images and ways of seeing. Uzbekistan does not just show you history, it makes you feel like a participant in it. Part 16. Tips from Julia. Making the most of your trip. A few things I wish someone had told me before my first trip to Uzbekistan. Learn a few words of Uzbek or Russian before you go. Even just hello, salam in Uzbek, privet in Russian. Good morning, thank you, delicious. It opens every door. People here light up when a visitor makes any effort at all with the language. It signals respect and curiosity, and it will change the quality of your interactions dramatically. Dress modestly, especially when visiting mosques, madrasas, and religious sites. Women should have shoulders and knees covered. A light scarf or shawl to throw over your shoulders is perfect and takes up no space in your bag. Men should avoid shorts in religious spaces. This is not a hardship. It is basic cultural respect, and the people who live here will appreciate it. Bargain, but not aggressively. Bargaining is expected in bazaars and with taxis, but Uzbekistan is not a country where vendors are trying to rip you off in any serious way. The prices are already incredibly low by any Western standard. A bit of good-natured negotiation is fine and even expected. Aggressive bargaining over tiny amounts with people who are already selling things cheaply is just rude. Know the difference. Bring gifts. Uzbeks love to give, and they appreciate receiving. Nothing elaborate. Chocolate from your home country, a postcard, a small object that represents where you are from. When someone invites you into their home for tea, a small gift is a lovely gesture. It deepens connection. Stay in family guest houses whenever possible, not international hotel chains. The guest houses are cheaper, more beautiful, more characterful, and the hosts are the best guide to the city you will ever find. They know everything: the best place to eat, the hidden courtyard that does not appear in any guidebook, the right time to visit a particular monument to avoid the crowds. Your guest house host is your most valuable resource. Take your time. Do not try to see everything. The temptation in Uzbekistan is to race between monuments and tick off every famous site on the list. Resist it. The best moments come from slowing down, from sitting in a courtyard for an extra hour, from following a sound down an alley, from accepting the invitation for tea. The monuments are extraordinary, but they are the backdrop. The life happening around them is the foreground. Conclusion. Uzbekistan is one of those rare places that gives back exactly as much as you put in. If you go looking for postcard shots and fast check-ins at famous monuments, you will get those. And they will be spectacular because the architecture here is genuinely among the most beautiful on earth. But if you go with an open heart and a slow pace and a willingness to sit with a cup of tea and see what happens, Uzbekistan will give you something else entirely. Something harder to explain and impossible to forget. You will live like a king there on $15 a day. You will eat better than you have eaten anywhere. You will sleep in rooms of extraordinary beauty. You will walk through the physical remains of a civilization that shaped the entire world. And you will meet people who will remind you, in the most direct and uncomplicated way, of what it means to be genuinely generous. So go. Book the flight. Get on the train. Walk through the blue gate into the old city. Look up. Let it take your breath away. I will see you on the other side. I am Julia, and this has been your guide to living like a king in Uzbekistan. Subscribe if you want more, leave a comment telling me where you want to go next, and as always, travel far, travel open, and travel with your whole heart.